The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
What if I told you that the real power behind the American economy isn't in the hands of politicians, Wall Street executives, or even billion-dollar corporations? There's a hidden force, an institution that operates in the shadows, influencing interest rates, controlling inflation, and even deciding who wins and who loses in the financial world. This entity doesn't just react to the economy, it shapes it. But how much power does it really hold? And could it be the one force capable of breaking the entire system? Stay with me as we uncover the truth behind the bank that secretly controls all banks. Who holds the true power to shape America's economy? In the US, economic power is often seen as the foundation of success and influence. It dictates markets, creates jobs, and drives growth. For decades, we've been led to believe that billionaires, Wall Street executives, and massive corporations are the ones making the biggest decisions. But is that really the case? Or could the true power lie somewhere else, somewhere most people never even think to look? The complex web of economic power, corporations, politicians, and central banks. Economic power isn't just about wealth. It's about who makes the rules that govern the system. While it's easy to blame corporate giants or billionaires, the real power players are much harder to see. Yes, corporations have massive influence. Politicians set laws. Regulators oversee the markets. But behind them all, one institution quietly controls the entire game: the Federal Reserve. Unlike corporations that focus on profit or politicians who are limited by election cycles, the Federal Reserve, or simply the Fed, holds the power to print money, set interest rates, and decide the cost of borrowing for businesses and consumers. That's real economic power. And it doesn't stop there, breaking down the forces that could shatter the US economy. Right now, the American economy is at a tipping point. Inflation is out of control. Job markets are unstable. Government debt is skyrocketing. The cost of living keeps rising. While we often hear about politicians' failed policies or corporations prioritizing profits, what if the real force driving this crisis is the very system that controls the money itself? During economic downturns, the Fed steps in, adjusting interest rates and injecting cash into the markets. But these interventions don't always fix the problem. They often create new ones. In fact, this is exactly what happened in 2008. The 2008 crisis, a wake-up call for economic power.
2008 was a tumultuous year for the economy. The housing market collapse created one financial crisis after another, and it often seemed as if the news could only get worse. Here's a look back at the roller coaster that was our nation's economy in 2008.
The 2008 financial crisis wasn't just a market collapse, it was a moment of revelation. Banks made reckless bets, the housing bubble bursts, the stock market plummeted. But when the economy crashed, who came to the rescue? The Federal Reserve. They bailed out banks, pumped trillions into the financial system, and kept the economy from total collapse. But here's the catch. These moves created a dangerous precedent. They proved that the Fed could single-handedly decide which institutions survived and which failed. So, was the financial crisis caused by reckless banks or by a system that allowed them to take those risks in the first place? And more importantly, could this happen again? Who really controls the economy? Let's break it down. Politicians create policies, but they depend on the Fed to finance government debt. Corporations control industries, but they rely on the Fed's monetary policy to keep credit flowing. The stock market rises and falls, but it's the Fed's actions that determine liquidity. So, where does real power lie? Is it with the elected officials, the corporate elites, or is it with the unelected financial institutions that pull the strings behind the scenes? And that brings us to the biggest question of all. Can the Fed break the American economy? Let's look at the facts. 1. The Fed controls interest rates. Raising them slows inflation, but also kills jobs and crashes markets. Lowering them fuels growth, but also increases debt and devalues the dollar. 2. The Fed prints money. The more money in circulation, the weaker its value. The weaker its value, the higher prices rise. Inflation becomes a hidden tax on everyone. 3. The Fed picks winners and losers. In 2008, it bailed out Wall Street, not ordinary Americans. In 2020, it flooded markets with cash, causing today's runaway inflation. If a single institution can dictate borrowing costs, control inflation, and decide which businesses survive, doesn't that mean it holds power to break the economy too? Because here's the truth. If the Fed raises interest rates too aggressively, we could see another recession. If they print too much money, inflation will spiral out of control. And if they make the wrong move, millions could lose their jobs, homes, and savings. And yet, most Americans have no idea how much power they actually hold. Final thoughts. Who really runs the system? So, after everything we've uncovered, let's ask the big question one last time. Who truly holds the power to break the American economy? Is it the politicians elected to represent the people? Is it corporations driven by profit and global influence? Or is it the Federal Reserve, the unelected institution that controls the entire financial system? The truth is, real economic power isn't just about money. It's about control. Control over interest rates. Control over inflation. Control over the rules that decide who thrives and who fails. And that control, it doesn't sit in the White House. It doesn't sit in corporate boardrooms. It sits within the Federal Reserve. So, what do you think? Do you believe the Federal Reserve is the real force behind economic power, or is there an even bigger player pulling the strings? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's continue this conversation. And if you want to go deeper into economic trends, check out this next video on how inflation is silently stealing your wealth.